Good afternoon, Year 6. Happy Friday. Right, so moving on to the next chapter, chapter 23. It's called A Favour. Okay. Marlon, could you do me a favour? What's that? Five weeks had passed since the bucket of blood incident, and unfortunately, for a while, it stirred up a whole lot of interest in me again. Now, Mum insisted on driving me to and from school every day, and going to the leisure centre was out of the question. Mum and Dad wouldn't hear of it. I could still see Mum and Dad's faces when we got home that night. Mum ranted and raved and raged for a good hour, while Dad stood by the front window watching the crowds outside our house and silently seething. Only Nan recognised how I felt. She understood why I wanted to go back to the leisure centre. She understood why I wanted to get things back to normal as soon as possible. But Mum and Dad wouldn't hear of it. And now that Nan had gone back to her own home, I had no one on my side. So the way I saw it, Mum and Dad left me no choice. Thankfully, the second pig heart transplant had taken place at Dr. Bryce's clinic, so I was no longer the sole focus of attention. It made what I was doing easier. It was simple, really. I had some problems of my own to sort out. Marlon, could you cover for me again tonight? You're not going swimming again, are you? Marlon asked, upset. I could tell he wasn't happy with me for the position I was placing him in. Every day for the last week, I'd phoned my mum to tell her I was going to his house after school. Then, after my swim, I'd go to his house for 10 minutes or so, then phone for Mum and Dad to come and pick me up. I knew that sooner or later I'd be found out, but with a little luck, it would be later. I'd suddenly become obsessed with swimming. Well, not so much with swimming as with daredevil diving. I still hadn't made it to the bottom of the pool, but I was going to. I was determined. I had no idea why it was so important to me, but it was. It was as if, by touching the bottom of the pool, I'd be proving something to myself and the rest of the world. Only I had no idea what. Cam, you can't keep doing this. You can't go to the leisure centre every evening. Watch me, I said. But suppose someone sees you, Marlon said unhappily. So what? Besides, things are back to normal now. The crowds have gone from outside our house. Our phone's been plugged back in. Nan's gone home. Why should everything else be allowed to return to normal except my life? I argued. Going swimming after school every day isn't normal unless you're training for the Olympics, said Marlon, and you won't even let me come with you. You've got to stay at your house just in case my mum or dad phone, I said. Sooner or later, they're going to twig. Grown-ups are stupid, but they're not stupid all the time. I know, but I'll have finished by the time Mum and Dad catch me. Finished what? I didn't answer. So will you cover for me? You know I will, Marlon replied. Of course I know you will. I smiled at Marlon, because I know I can trust you. Marlon smiled at that, but the frown didn't take long to return to his face. Marlon and Cameron, would you like to stand up and share your conversation with the rest of the class? Asked Mr. Stewart. I'm sure we'd all be fascinated to hear what's so riveting that you have to speak while I'm trying to teach. I said the first thing that came into my head. I was asking Marlon if he'd written a poem for his English homework. And had he? No, sir. And have you? Yes, sir. Let's hear it then, said Mr. Stewart. I stared at him. It's not really finished yet. Doesn't matter. Let's hear it. It's not very good. Let's hear it. Sir, it's dire, I admitted. The rest of the class tittered at that. I'm even more intrigued now. Get it out, said Mr. Stewart. I scowled at him, but he wasn't going to change his mind. Reluctantly, I dug into my desk. I couldn't believe he was really going to make me read it out. I always knew he was a sadist, and here was my proof. Sorry, sir, I must have left it at home, I lied. No way was I going to read out my first attempt at my homework. It was a poem about a butterfly, for goodness sake. No way was I going to read out anything so weedy. That's a shame. I'll have to make sure I ask your English teacher to show me this amazing poem worthy of all that discussion just now, said Mr. Stewart. Sorry, sir, I mumbled. Mr. Stewart got on with the rest of the lesson. Me? I couldn't wait for the lesson to finish. I was desperate to leave and go swimming. Under the water, nothing and no one could touch me. Nothing could trouble me. Thank goodness this was the last lesson of the day. As soon as the buzzer went, I would make sure I was the first one out of the classroom. In fact, the others wouldn't be able to see me for dust. One of the advantages of having a new heart, even if it was from a pig, it made me healthy enough to get out of the class in a hurry. Take a deep breath, I told myself, and another, and another. Now go. I struck out for the middle of the pool, kicked back with my legs and dived. Kick, kick, kick. Down, down, down. The water stung my eyes, and the further down I went, the more it felt as if giant hands were wrapped around my chest and squeezing. But I kept going. I could see the bottom, just a little further. But from the pounding of my heart and the raging of my blood in my head, I knew I'd have to turn back now, or I wouldn't be able to turn back at all. Cursing my weak body, I headed back up towards the surface of the water, desperately disappointed. Would I ever make it to the bottom? I was beginning to wonder. But I had a more immediate problem. The surface of the swimming pool looked as if it was miles away. I kicked harder, forcing myself to go faster. I broke through the surface of the water just as I thought my lungs must surely burst. I tried to float on my back, but my body was having spasms from trying to drink down air into my starved lungs. I swallowed some water and started coughing and spluttering as I tried to clear my mouth. I twisted round, forcing myself to float, forcing my body to calm down. My heart, which had been racing so fast it seemed to consist of just one continuous beat, began to slow down. But I had a pain in my left shoulder and the left side of my neck. I felt sick and my lungs were hurting and the pain didn't ease as I began to breathe more normally. I made my way to the side of the pool and hauled myself out. Even that was a major effort. I was so tired. I went back to the changing rooms, had a shower, and decided to head straight home. By the time I put my front door key in the lock, the pain in my shoulder had passed, but I still felt a bit sick. I'd been feeling vaguely nauseous for a few days now, and it was getting worse, not better. As I closed the front door behind me, I could hear one of Mum's favourite Lenny Kravitz songs playing softly from the living room. I tiptoed to the living room door, which was open. I peeped through the crack between the door and the door frame. Mum was sitting on the sofa with her feet up on Dad's lap, and Dad was massaging her toes. Again. That's very relaxing, Mum smiled at Dad. Alex has stopped kicking me and gone to sleep. She patted her bulging stomach. I can't believe I'm massaging your smelly toes again. You are such a smooth talker, said Dad in his lovey-dovey voice. You could talk the man in the moon into giving you a green cheese sandwich. I don't want the man in the moon. I just want you, Mum smiled, making me want to throw up. What is it with you two and toes? I asked, going into the room. Mum frowned. What are you doing here? I thought you were at Marlon's. I was. I decided to come home by myself. Mum swung her feet off Dad's lap. You came home by yourself? Her voice was sharp. Yes, I did, and nothing happened, I replied. Cameron? I could tell Mum was winding up for a mega rant. Kathy, you can't spend the rest of your life hovering over Cam like a hawk, Dad said gently. Sooner or later, he's got to start doing things for himself again. You can't do everything for him. I'm not trying to, I just... Dad smiled, and with that smile, Mum's voice trailed off. Are you okay? She asked me at last. I'm fine, I lied. My nausea hadn't passed, but I wasn't about to give Mum an excuse to smother me again. I wished Nan was here. I badly wanted to talk to her. Mum, I began. The doorbell rang. I'll get it, I said. No, Mum said at once. Oh, Kathy, Dad admonished gently. The crowds have gone, the police have gone, and most of the letters have stopped. We can't spend the rest of our time in this house hiding and living in fear. I saw Mum take a deep breath. I thought you were going to open the door, she snapped. I smiled. I knew the snap wasn't directed at me. Even if I lived to be 90, Mum would still be fussing over me. I went back out into the hall, thinking how nice it was to walk into the house and not hear a major argument going on between Mum and Dad. Things seemed to be working out after all. I opened the front door. Dr. Bryce, I said, surprised. We only saw you a week ago. You're not due again until after Christmas. I need to see you and your parents. Dr. Bryce told me with no trace of a smile. One look at his face and I could see it was serious. Without a word, I stepped aside. Dr. Bryce came into the house and headed straight for the living room. I closed the door slowly behind him. I stood out in the hall for a few moments. I didn't want to go into the living room. I was afraid of what I would hear. Maybe if I stayed out in the hall, then whatever it was wouldn't be about me and wouldn't affect me. But it didn't work that way. Whatever it was, it wouldn't go away just because I wanted to do my ostrich act and bury my head in the hall carpet. I walked into the living room. Mum and Dad were sitting on the sofa with Mum's feet now firmly on the ground. Dr. Bryce was in the armchair. They all watched me as I sat down next to Dad. I've got some bad news. Dr. Bryce didn't even attempt to beat about the bush. He turned and looked directly at me. To put it simply, Cameron, your white blood cell count is way up. My T cells or my B cells? I asked. Dr. Bryce was too worried to be impressed. How much do you know about the way your immune system and your white blood cells work? Only what we've done in biology and what I've read in books and over the internet, I admitted. Hang on, what does all this mean exactly? Dad asked quietly. A deep silence filled the room. It means, Dr. Bryce began. It means that maybe my body is starting to reject my new heart, I interrupted, never taking my eyes off the doctor. Not necessarily. It may just mean that we need to rethink the dosage and content of your anti-rejection and immunosuppressant drugs. The trouble with all these drugs is that it's a fine balancing act between what and how much of each drug you should get. I thought you said you developed a new drug, a complement blocker that would stop Cameron's body rejecting his heart. Mum's expression was stony. We have. I hope. We just need to amend the dosage. Cameron, I bought you a new series of injections which I'd like you to start taking immediately. I'll take the old ones back with me. More injections, Mum said, dismayed. We've reached a deal with a pharmaceutical company only this week. They've agreed to start manufacturing the drug in tablet form from the new year. We don't have the resources at my clinic to do that, so hopefully the injections won't be for too much longer. Cameron, I also want to change the immunosuppressant tablets you're taking. I think we need to be more aggressive. Will all this work? I asked. It's impossible to tell. All we can do at this stage is monitor you closely and keep fine-tuning the dosages of the various drugs you need to stop your body rejecting your new heart. Dr. Bryce dug into his large briefcase and brought out a clear plastic box full of vials. We don't want your body to reject your new heart, but at the same time we don't want to leave your immune system so weak that you couldn't fight off a cold if you caught one. I understand, I nodded. How have you been feeling, Cameron? Have you been feeling more tired than normal? Or maybe a bit ill? No, I shook my head. I've been feeling fine. Great, in fact. Dr. Bryce studied me. I think I should go back to seeing you weekly rather than monthly. But what about my fortnightly checkups at the local hospital? Do you still want me to go there as well? Yes, I think so. I'll speak to the hospital. I also want to change a few of the tests you regularly have. I shrugged. Okay, if you think I should. I do, Dr. Bryce replied. Well, I'd better go upstairs and get on with my homework, I said, jumping to my feet. No one told me to stay, so I didn't. I left the room and forced myself to run up the stairs, even though I was dog-tired. When I got to my room, I chucked myself down on my bed, gasping for breath. My heart was pounding again. I told myself that the stairs weren't responsible for my racing pulse. It was Dr. Bryce's news, but I knew that was only partly true. I thought of Alex downstairs, waiting to be born, but the thought hurt, so I turned my thoughts to the swimming pool at my local leisure centre instead. I'll make you a deal, I spoke to my new heart. I'll play Daredevil Dive just one more time. If I manage to touch the bottom of the pool, then you have to stay inside me and not cause me any more trouble. And you, I spoke to the rest of my body, and you have to leave my heart alone and let it get on with pumping my blood around my body. Okay, everyone? I'll try to touch the bottom of the pool just one more time, and if I manage it, then we all live together until we're 90. Agreed? It was agreed. I'd go to the pool after school tomorrow. I was in control once again. Not my body, not my heart, but me. All I had to do was touch the bottom of the pool. My future was now back in my own hands. Okay, so what do you think about the news that we've just heard? And what do you think about Cameron's decision to try and play Daredevil Dive again? Personally, I think it's not a good idea after what we've just learned. And also, what do you think about the fact that he lied to Dr. Bryce about feeling okay? Do you think he should have told the truth? What are your feelings about it? Let me know. Like I said, thank you so much to those children that are letting me know every day what they think. The rest of you, can you please do that? You just have to write a little comment underneath this activity. Have a lovely weekend, and I will see you on Monday.